Hi, Susanna. Welcome to Ali Cookies by Barrier Break.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. So, Susanna, we wanted to talk to you. I always refer to you as the mother of European accessibility for me. If I ever have a question to ask, you're the person I'll end up coming to. So I think that's one of the reasons to invite you here today. And I thought people should see the fun side of you and how much you do. So with that, let's get started. So firstly, is the European Accessibility Act a law or a standard?
Well, the Accessibility Act is a law. So standards are voluntary and laws are not voluntary. They are obligatory. So it's a big difference between a law and a standard.
Okay. So what is the European Accessibility Act exactly?
Well, exactly, that takes more time than we have now, I think. But the Act is a law. So it's a very ambitious law affecting not only EU member states, but also all economic operators that produce, import, or sell certain products and services into the EU. So it actually affects the whole world.
Wow. And if I was to follow this law, what are the dates that matter that I should remember?
Well, the dates that matter are the 28th of June, 2025. That's I think, the only date that really matters because that is when the legislation enters into force. And then there are some transposition measures as well, but really it's 28th of June next year, and that is when the law enters into force. So that is your kind of the cutoff date when everything should be accessible. We just wake up on the 29th and everything is fixed. That's beautiful.
1 year from now, 1 year, 10 days, and we will wake up to that morning. Wow. I am going to
Yeah.
wait to see this happen, and I'm sure you are. So,
Yeah.
so what does this cover? Web, mobile, or more?
Well, the Accessibility Act covers computers, smartphones, self-service terminals, e-books, e-commerce, consumer banking services, emergency communications, and many other things. So all of this, if they have a website or a mobile app, that is also included. And of course, documentation, support services around these products and services. So it's a lot more than just web and mobile apps.
Very different from the rest of the world, I would say, when we think about it holistically and what all it's covering for us. And you talked about, products and services. So what products and services are covered?
Well, so a product is typically something you can physically hold on to, like a smartphone. So that is covered. Hardware, computers, all of those things, and also self-service terminals, for example. So those are all products. And the services are like the emergency communication, the e-banking services, the e-commerce, the e-readers and e-books. All of that is kind of you can discuss if it's a product or a service, but they are both covered, both the content and the actual reader. So all these products and services are covered. And sometimes you need a service like the e-commerce service to buy a product, which is the smartphone. And then you have an app in the smartphone that could be either a service or a product. So it's a little bit blurred, the limitations between the two. But I think with calling it both products and services, it kind of covers or should be covering most things that have to do with, for example, consumer banking. So it doesn't really matter if it's a hardware or software part, but if you need this thing to do your bank, to handle payments and so on, then it's covered.
Again, a very different perspective from the way the rest of the world looks at it. I've seen so many people tell me that they only have a product and the service aspect of it is not their responsibility. And I see that's what you're talking about out here. Amazing.
Yeah, this is more holistic, really. So it's quite clever, but it also makes it complex, of course, to understand.
So another complexity. The difference between EAA, Web Accessibility Directive, and EN 301549 for the common man.
Well, they're really two different things, apples and pears that you're comparing. So the Accessibility Act and the Web Accessibility Directive are different laws. They're completely different laws with the EU, and the EN 301549, that is a standard. So we already talked about what the Act is, and the web accessibility covers public sector bodies and bodies governed by public law. That means kind of the gray zone around the public sector that is funded by and managed by the government. But the Accessibility Act doesn't really, then it doesn't matter the legal status. You could be a not-for-profit or a commercial or a public, doesn't matter. It's just the actual product and service needs to be in scope for you to be in scope of the law. So they are kind of put together in different ways, you could say. They differ from each other. The EN 301549, that's my baby. It's a standard, a harmonized standard that is supporting the minimum requirements. So you can read in the law who is covered by the law and what is covered, and then you turn to the standard to get support on how to actually achieve accessibility. So it's technical specifications, if you will. It's a very long document, but it's supposed to support companies and organizations that want to comply with the legislation.
And is EAA going to be enforced, and how?
Oh, yes, it's going to be enforced, definitely. So each member state has sector-specific surveillance authorities that will monitor compliance and also handle complaints. And the member states always also have the possibility to hand out fines and even take products off market if they refuse to meet the obligations. So products also need to have the CE marking, but services just need to comply with their, the product, the service itself, and also the documentation and the support services need to comply.
Interesting. So now if I have a travel mobile app that sells airline tickets, and that is in the market already, but I'm going to be updating this mobile app and releasing it on the 1st of August 2025. Do I need to comply with EAA?
Well, there is never a reason not to comply. So of course you should. But the Act applies from the 28th of June 2025, and your question becomes a bit tricky because an app could potentially be considered a product or a service or both. And the update could be kind of changing the whole thing or just be a small add-on to, you moving a comma or something. So it really depends legally. But if you have a running contract with, say, an airline services, then that service, and you have signed that contract before the law entered into force, then you can stay on that contract. You continue to use that service for another 5 years. So that may be applicable in this situation. But if you are an independent travel app provider, then you are in scope of the legislation and you can't kind of have a contract with yourself. So then you have to comply directly. So you have kind of chosen a fringe or a borderline question here, but yeah, that's how it works.
So as a last question to you, EAA, does it make you hopeful or disheartened?
That's a good question. Actually, both, because I have never been convinced that legislation is really the right way to achieve accessibility improvements. Many people disagree with me on that, but here I am spending most of my working days consulting about this legislation. And this has been the case since the Web Accessibility Directive came out in 2018. So the good thing is, of course, that legislation kind of pushes accessibility into the agenda, so people talk about it and are aware. That's very good. But what I see, the negative part is that with a law, people tend to focus more on, do I really have to do this? What do I have to do? What's the minimum that can I judge this some way? And really, instead of how can I make my product or service better for as many people as possible, which I think is the right way to think about accessibility. But the law has something very beautiful in it, and that is that it says in the Accessibility Act that the objective is to maximize the foreseeable use of these products and services. And that is, to me, a very beautiful way to talk about accessibility, to maximize the foreseeable use.
Well, Susanna, I think you've left me inspired, and you want me to do more. And I think you will leave everybody else to do more with this. So I think we're also hopeful with you, but also somewhere disheartened. And we will all work towards this. But thank you for doing this. And I hope to bring you back to give us a more detailed answer one day, because I know the Susanna and you is the more in-depth one. Then let's touch it on the surface. But thank you so much.
Okay, thank you much, Shilpi. Thank you.
Thanks.